Welcome to Keep Smiling, the e-commerce customer experience podcast. Hello again, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm your host, Ty Walters. Today we discuss e-commerce customer service. We're following a thread from Customer Obsession in episode 36 to customer service in 37, and today in 38, e-commerce customer service, what I would see as a division or subcategory of customer service overall. There's a few more foundational episodes ahead. What is customer service? What is e-commerce? Things like that. And I didn't want to get too complicated or technical or practical before we covered some of those. Again, even though we may have in the past, I think it's worth noting some thoughts and reference points on those before getting into it. However, there will be some news and updates, and today is an example that we'll have to share where we slip some of that maybe more advanced topical type of customer service related things in. They're maybe too urgent to share, and they're really important. So, and I'll communicate that next before we get into e-commerce customer service. What you'll also notice today, which is different about the show, is at the end, there'll be a CTA. This is usually a call to action. This is good marketing practice to include anytime you're communicating with potential customers. What can they do after listening or reading or watching you? And in this CTA, this is a challenge to action and a simple reframing. But a lot of these, I think, even though they may be simple activities, can come off as difficult to do, maybe technically difficult if it's above our knowledge, or maybe just psychologically difficult to do if there's something blocking us, something in our way. And a lot of times we are our own worst enemy. So a challenge to action, and that challenge will be related to the content of the episode. So we're talking about e-commerce customer service. And I mentioned if you're listening to this episode, you have some stake or some relationship to a brand and perhaps customer service and some stake in that going well. And so today, if that's you, or if you're in more of an aspirational situation, we have some challenges for you. And so let's get into the content. Before we get into that, let's get into our first maybe technical news update. I'd like to address a sweeping industry update. Gmail and Yahoo are the two entities which come to mind. But Gmail says, starting February 1st, 2024, all senders who send email to Gmail accounts must set up SPF or DKIM email authentication for your domain. I've heard it DKIM, DKIM. So Gmail is saying, and if you're listening to this deadline is already passed. That doesn't mean your emails are all just going to spam or not delivering. They may be delivering with a different presentation on them. And this is all about getting our email delivered with the highest level of integrity and brand representation. And we don't want our email going to spam when we're in customer service or e-commerce. We want all those communications being delivered on time and as we would expect. So consequently, we wrote a blog article about this, which applies some of these updates and requirements from Gmail and Yahoo to e-commerce merchants and customer service teams. And we cover in this article at our blog some of the things to consider, why these types of domain settings are important for secure communications in an electronic digital world. And go to our blog, sellersmile.com/blog for more. You'll see an article entitled Better Email Security and Deliverability with DKIM, SPF, and DMARC authentication. With that warning, with that sort of challenge to action at the beginning out of the way, let's start the 5 minutes and get into e-commerce customer service. So previous episode, we covered multiple definitions from various organizations that have products related to customer service. And here we're bringing in a definition from Amazon, and they define customer service on their website. And they say, e-commerce or electronic commerce is the trading of goods and services on the internet. It is your bustling city center or brick and mortar shop translated into zeros and ones on the internet superhighway. An estimated 2.14 billion people worldwide buy goods and services online, and the number of Prime members shopping Amazon stores globally now tops 200 million. And they have a sell.amazon.com slash learn slash what is e-commerce is the source there. And it's a sales page for third-party sellers and directing them into that path. But I appreciate Amazon's definition here, and the portion I would like to highlight is electronic commerce. When I heard or read that, I thought electronic mail. So we have email, e-commerce. There seems to be a parallel there. And looking into the history, not getting too deep into it, it appears to be so. So the early rise of this technology labeled it electronic commerce, and then e-commerce for short. We use the dash, or some don't. And so, what is e-commerce? And the more I think about this, the more it tends to blur with what I would say normal commerce. But we regard e-commerce today as a subcategory of total commerce. So let's take a look at what we mean by that. So this report is from the Census Bureau of the Department of Commerce. They have a publication entitled Quarterly Retail E-commerce Sales. And this is a chart that comes with that publication. It's freely available. We have it linked below. And I will mention, I manipulated this chart just to make it fit the slide here a little bit better, but all of the numbers are the same. And what I want to point out here is that, as you can see in 2020, if you can see my cursor, there was this huge uptick in the percentage of e-commerce versus total commerce. So when we talk about total, we're talking about brick and mortar, when transactions are happening inside of a store. So we have e-commerce back in 2014 around a humble maybe 6%, and kind of it looks like to me climbing linearly. And then of course COVID happened, and a large portion of that activity shifted online out of necessity. And the bump from that leveled out, it looks like, over the past few years, and I would see it sort of climbing again and resuming that upward trajectory. So a notable quote from this report said, e-commerce sales in the third quarter of 2023 accounted for 14.9% of total sales. That still blows my mind. So that means 85% of commerce is happening outside of e-commerce. I'm steeped in e-commerce every day. It just feels like it's the entire world. I myself shop at e-commerce in multiple ways, and probably exclusively if I could. So to note that e-commerce is still a minority of the online shopping, that a minority of the shopping activity that happens today, is quite notable, and it's interesting. And for me, it signals that there's a lot of room for expansion, and I would expect to see the share of e-commerce continue to take over. So we have a definition here from Big Commerce. We talked about what is e-commerce and how is e-commerce in maybe relation to total commerce, but e-commerce customer service, again, is now applying that customer service to the e-commerce setting. Their definition reads, technological innovations have changed how we shop. The proliferation of smartphones, 4G, and even 5G connectivity have led to a rise in online shopping. E-commerce customer service is how e-commerce stores support this new breed of customers. It encompasses all assistance brands can provide customers throughout their journey. That means everything from social media to post-sale support and FAQs to help desks. I just see this as an expansion. 100 years ago, maybe you were providing support mostly in person. Maybe you had telegrams or letters in the mail. Then we had phone, then we had email, and now we have orders instantly online with all these automations. And how we serve our customers, we meet them at the touch points where they can interact with us. So that brings us to the final 10 seconds of the episode, the challenges to action. Number one, share your e-commerce story. So I just represented that e-commerce is this humble percentage, this minority of total commerce that's happening, at least in the United States. So if you're in e-commerce at all, I would think of that as like a badge of honor. We're still in the, I would say, forefront of in an exciting and expanding category. So my challenge to you is to share that story with someone in your life. Maybe it's on social media, but tell them about what you do and why you do it, and why it matters to you. And if you don't work in e-commerce yet, maybe you're aspiring, share your e-commerce goals with someone. Why do you want to become a merchant, or why do you want to get into another aspect of e-commerce? And sharing those stories can help us start to move us forward, and help us appreciate where we are and recognize that in the context of everything else that's going on. Number two, as the deadline is passed for the email authentication settings, I'd like if you own and operate a domain, or if you're thinking about purchasing a domain, you'll have to deal with some of these updates soon. So I'd like you to start where you are. If you know nothing about email authentication and some of these acronyms, I'd like you to start learning about that. I invite you to, and I challenge you to learn about those because they're important to maintaining your website. A lot of the platforms that e-commerce sellers are using, like Shopify and a lot of the email service providers, are leaning on their users and merchants to make these updates. And it really boils down to offering good, solid, secure communications that your customers can rely on. So I challenge you, if you have those records and you already have a domain and a website, I challenge you to find those records, review them, and make some edits. We'll talk more in following episodes about email authentication, but sometimes just finding them is a challenge. And they're stored where your domain is usually registered and where you log in to see details about your domain name. So yourstore.com, usually it's one of the big providers, but we can talk more about that later. So that's it. I wanted to thank you for joining us on episode 38 to talk about e-commerce customer service. It's applying that customer obsession through customer service to a subsection of our customers who have purchased and interacted with us online in some way. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Can't wait to see you in the next one. Thank you so much.